I shall put up, this is lecture 13, okay? So 1-3 for U.S. and Texas government. We're going to continue discussing Congress, and the other day we were discussing the powers of Congress, okay? The enumerated powers, that is, those powers that are stated or written out in the Constitution, and I would assign you to read Article 1 of the Constitution, which talks about Congress. It's Section 8, okay? And it'll talk about the enumerated powers, what Congress does, okay? But then it also has the implied powers. What does it mean to be implied? It's kind of like we were just discussing, that question, do you still beat your wife kind of thing? It's implied that you beat your wife, right? That question is, right? No, of course you don't. First you have to have a wife, you don't, so. But implied powers are those powers that are assumed to be had in order to do the job that's asked of you. So there's in the Constitution, it discusses the fact that Congress has the power to enact laws in order to fulfill its duties as Congress. That not all of its powers need be enumerated, that is spelled out. That there are some powers that it has, that if it didn't have it, they wouldn't be able to fulfill their task. Does it make sense to you? Now my suggestion to you is to obviously read all of Article 1, but specifically get into the section on the powers, because it's very important, because if you want to know what Congress does, what they should be doing, where their power is and where it ends, that's a big deal, right? Then you should read that aspect of the Constitution. It is the legislative branch. There's certain facts we need to bring out about Congress that I think would just be good for us to discuss today. Okay, we're going to do two things. First, we're going to just discuss these things, go through these powers. It's almost going to be reiterating what I discussed the other day since you weren't here. And then we're going to go on and we're going to talk about the issues in the political realm. That is, what are the two-party platforms? That, because we were discussing the other day how most people vote, they really don't know how to decide on who or what to vote for. And so we were discussing the issues the other day. I think we got through like 5 of them. They're pretty heavy. And so I'd like to discuss some of those again. And, because there are ways people go about deciding to vote for people or things that if you were to take a logic class, you would say, that is not good reasoning. Okay, now as a logic professor, you say, well, we're in government. Right, I'm also a logic professor, all right? And so I want you to be good citizens and to reason well in the public sphere, okay? And so that's why we're going to discuss these topics. It's not about what or who to vote for. It's how do you think about these issues or these people, okay? Does that make sense to you? So you don't want to vote for somebody just because they are a female, right? That'd be weird, okay? Because truth is not gender. 2 + 2 is 4, no matter who says it. All humans are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, whether you're a male or female. I mean, what if a male is saying that's true and the female says, no, not all humans are created equal. We should reenact slavery, right? And then you go, why would I believe you? And she says, well, because I'm a woman. Well, that would be bad reasoning, wouldn't it? And so, but there's a lot of that out there, is there not? This person is, doesn't believe in science. That's bad reasoning too, because, that's, we go, well, what do you mean by science? Is it okay to not agree with all scientists? I mean, can you be reasonable? Are you anti-science just because you are anti one theory? right? Does that make sense? And so you hear a lot of that. You heard that during the debate last night, did you not? Did anybody else watch the debate last night?
I watched Parliament.
Yeah, did you hear any accusations like that? They're trying to get you to vote for them, right?
Yeah.
So, and did you watch any of it?
Just part of it.
It would. So, I of course I'm gonna watch it all, and I'm like, and then I watch the commentary afterwards, and then I comment on the commentary, how bad the commentary was, because people need my commentary, right? And then my wife and I get to discuss it while going to bed, and then finally we fall asleep, and I wake up and I get to discuss it with you. So, it's just kind of fun, never ending. Let's talk a little bit about Congress. What does Congress do? In a big picture, what branch of government is it? Starts with a L and ends with legislative.
Legislative.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, legislative. What does legislative mean?
Make the law.
It makes the laws. Yeah, I mean, so if there's a law to be now, is that a good thing? How many of you guys like laws? I mean, how many of you are like sitting there walking around going, you know what, we need to pass a law that tells us what not to do, or tell us what to do? How many of you like being told what to do? Not if you like being told what to do. Dude, that's a whole concept of liberty, right? And we have a whole branch of government dedicated to telling us what to do and telling us what not to do. Do you want more or less legislation? What do you think? More or less things to do or not do? What if every time I came up to you I had a set of chores or things thou shalt not do? And now I've convinced you already. I mean, it's slightly twisting your arm. And most citizens don't like more laws. I remember I was meeting with a state representative in Hawaii when I lived there, and I saw two guys talking, and they were, representatives. And they were saying, "Yeah, I haven't written a law for a long time. I need to do that." And I'm like asking myself, why would you need to do that? Well, they have a need to do it to feel like they're doing something, right? Because if they're not legislating, then why do they exist? And so there's a sense that, a Congress that creates laws is more valuable than one that does not. Sometimes maybe you think maybe some of their business should be repealing some laws, right? I mean, a lot of people believe marijuana laws should be repealed. How many people would not be in jail today if marijuana were legal? Now, I am not advocating for the smoking, the use of, or sale of marijuana. However, I am suggesting that if it were not illegal, there'd probably be less crime coming across the border trying to smuggle marijuana into our country. There'd be less drug dealing on what's called the black market, right? And so less people getting busted for that. And with less busting of that, that's less jail time for a lot of people. And less jail time means more dads at home, whether they be high or not. That's a different story, right? We're not decriminalizing homicide. Now, I'm not arguing for this. That's the argument, though. You see what I'm saying? There's a law about it. Now, of course, people, smoking marijuana actually does have some bad effects, especially in my field. It has the effect of destroying your memory, destroy your short-term memory, and it has the effect of kind of making you space out, so you're not as intellectually sharp. So of course I'm against it from an intellectual standpoint. Probably not good for your heart and not good for your lungs either if you're smoking it. So you got my argument against it, the use of it, but you wonder as far as law goes, the value of law. Is it damaging? Is the law damaging society more than the thing that it is forbidding? That's a question we ask, right? Now there are laws. Now, what about pornography? I believe all pornography should be illegal. I believe that is a highly destructive force on men. The women in it are horribly destroyed for sure because they're usually drug addicts, correct? But it's legal. Not only is it legal, it's there's very little regulation on it. Any kid can get on their phone, and go to the bathroom and check it out while mom and dad are in the other room hanging out. And they're under 18. I mean, when I was a kid, to get a dirty magazine, one had to be 18 or older, thank God. And so, and then you had to go to these really seedy, disgusting places where people like put hats and glasses on and these coats, and they'd walk in the back door and there are no windows because they were ashamed of it, right? As well they should have been, all right? But nowadays, you just take your phone, your computer, whatever, and you got all this garbage all over there poisoning your mind, destroying your marriage, destroying what men think about women and how men treat women and how women allow themselves to be treated. So, should that be legislated against? Or should we have the freedom to destroy ourselves and our country and our families? Now you see that's kind of loaded. That's kind of like, so do you think we should be allowed to destroy our families and our, country? And that's all the, now of course somebody say, it's not destructive. Yeah, it is, it really is, but you see the loaded question there, even in my own statement. You should, but again, these are things, think about what types of laws people make, okay? And why they would make a law. Now there are different laws. Now some of the legislation has to do with the collection of taxes, correct? And so that they can set up things for the quote good of society, but some of these things do what? Cost money. And so they must raise the funds in order to do them. And so those are things we also don't like. How many of you collect a paycheck from anybody? None of you? None of you work? You have a job?
It's babysitting.
Okay, so you're working under the table, huh?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, she's tax evading.
No.
Hey, it'll work. Anybody have ever had a job in here before? Where'd you work?
I used to work at IHOP.
IHOP, okay, International House of Pancakes. They were saying they were gonna change it to IHOB, the International House of Burgers. I don't know if you remember that. And it was a joke, just trying, you're going, no, why would they do that? That's just weird.
Didn't California actually do it?
They did for like a week, but it was just a publicity stunt.
Yeah.
It's a publicity. So anyway, so you notice when you got your paycheck and you get a pay stub, you're like, huh. I thought I'd get a little more than this.
Yeah.
And then you look and you find out, there's FICA and, you have Social Security, and then you have your state income tax. What state was this in?
Oh, I don't remember.
You don't remember what state you were in when you worked there?
No, Texas.
Texas, okay. And were you a waitress?
I was a hostess.
Hostess, okay, good. At least you got probably minimum wage. If you're a waiter or waitress here, you get like $2 an hour, and it's ridiculous. Yeah, because you're working on tips, but anyway, what about making laws that say that people have to pay you so much money? That's another law. You like that if you work for somebody, right? What about if you own the business? Do you like those laws? No, who wants to pay? Who wants laws that make you want to pay more or have to pay more? You want to pay more because business is good and because you value your company, not because the government tells you you have to pay X amount of dollars. Anyway, tell me a little more about Congress. Tell me about the two chambers.
There's the House and the Senate.
House and the Senate. What's a House known as?
House of Representatives.
Yeah, it's a House, or it's the People's, House, right? And that is based off of what? What's that? How do we get those guys? How do we determine the number of the
And based on the state population.
population? Yeah, the populations, that's correct, yeah. And originally it was about 30,000 people, and obviously the US grew, right? And as the United States grew, well, then, it turns out our House is now, they represent about 700,000 people each, which is quite large. I mean, that's kind of, so if you have one person, do you know who, and here's an assignment for you. It's gonna come anyway. Tell me, and you have your phone with you. All of you have your phone with you. tell me who your representative is. Write in text in there, you just say, who is my representative in Congress, or my congressional member, or something like that. And they will probably come up with a little thing that says, what is your zip code? And you put in your zip code, and in my case, it will pop up and it will say Lizzie Pletcher is mine, okay? That would be mine. Is that yours? Yes. And there are others that may pop up. Sheila Jackson Lee would be one that I usually get from my students. She walked right by me one day, didn't even say hi. Not that she knew me, but she said hi to everybody else. We were in line to vote. Here's a,
I have Bill Flores,
Bill Flores, what district?
17.
17? Okay. What is his party affiliation? Is there a D next to his name or an R next to his name? Bring it here. Let me see. You mind me touching your phone? I'm not sick or anything yet. So you're at house.gov now. Let's find it. See, Lizzie Pletcher's mine. Pletcher, no, I called her Pletcher. Al Green, he's famous. He ran on the notion that if he wins, he's a Republican. And I also want you to take note of what's on the right here. Budget, Energy, and Commerce. These are the committees he's on. So you take note, you got the Armed Service Committee, Judiciary Committee, the Finance, and we're gonna talk about committees today a bit too. Okay? All right, Flores. And every 2 years, these guys are up for what? Re-election. So who is who is Flores running against right now? Who's yours?
Dennis Paul.
Who?
Dennis Paul.
Dennis Paul, what district's that?
129.
29. Now what political affiliation?
Does not.
Just
Wait, click on it.
probably just hit his name, it'll pop up. What'd you get?
Republican.
Oh, Lizzie Fletcher.
Lizzie Pletcher, okay. And we know she's a Democrat,
Mhm.
Fletcher.
Green.
Al Green, yeah, I just mentioned him. Like I said, when he was running 2 years ago, he's like running when Donald Trump was going. He says, if I win, I will impeach Donald Trump, and he was serious about it. He hates Donald Trump. It's a personal thing. Okay, what committees is he on?
It doesn't say.
I think we just named him. See if you can find Al Green's committees on that site. House.gov. Go to house.gov.
I'm there.
What district is he in?
9.
9. Their committees aren't determined by their districts. Their committees are determined by the Speaker of the House. So the Speaker of the House, if she doesn't like you, who's the Speaker of the House right now? Nancy Pelosi. That's why I said she, because could be he, depending on who's in charge, who has the majority in Congress. Who has the majority in Congress right now, the Republicans or Democrats? The Democrats. That's why they have that's why the Speaker is a Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, and she gets to assign all the Democrats, not the Republicans, to their seats on their committees. And committees are generally groups, and we talk about how bills are passed, but these are groups that do certain tasks. They'll investigate things, they will look at bills and vote on them to see if they'll pass to go to the floor. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And they specialize because there's a lot of things out there that if every congressman had to deal with every issue, being specialized would be very difficult, and it'd be very difficult to do get a really good assessment of any one piece of legislation based on certain things, like the House Ways and Means, the judicial committees, judiciary committees, and stuff like that, armed services committees. They have committees that they just create for a specific purpose for a time, and then they go away once it's done. But then they have these committees, standing committees that continue as long, they're gonna keep going, right? As long as we have a country, we're gonna have armed forces. So as long as we have armed forces, we're gonna have an armed forces committee. And some people are going to actually be on those committees, and some are gonna wanna be on those committees because they are interested in them for whatever reason. They're, they specialize in that area, like, intelligence. I think I would wanna be on that. That just sounds interesting to me, right? Others have to do with farming, because their constituents, say in the Midwest, are farmers. So it's in their interest to be on that committee, so they have more power. That's where a lot of power comes from. So what happens now, if your party is mad at you, let's say you did not vote the way they wanted you to vote, let's say you get in trouble, like you have a moral failure. I can't remember the guy. Turned out he was a total racist, and the party just said, "We are stripping you of all of your committees," meaning he can't do anything. He has a vote on legislation, but he has no say in committees, and so he's kind of a lame duck. And so what happens when he comes back up for election and he's running? Not only does everybody know he's a racist, a real one at that, not just accused, his own party says, "Get out of here." Then he's up, "Reelect me, I will do this for you." And they're like, "No, you won't, you got no power." And so he gets primaried out. What is a primary? It's an election. So each party has their own elections to see who's gonna represent them, right? And so when AOC, that would be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, affectionately known as Sandy Cortez by her parents, she primaried a guy who was the incumbent Democrat, and she won. And I think she's in the Bronx, right? Either in Brooklyn or the Bronx. I think it's the Bronx. So this guy had been there forever, and he was a Democrat. And she goes, "Well, I'm gonna run against you. I'm gonna unseat you, and I'm gonna run for the Democrat seat." And she got it. And then Nancy Pelosi said, once all that was said and done, a glass of water can run in that district, and as long as it has the D in front of its name, it's gonna win. So the real, election over who's gonna be the representative in that area is not the general election between the Republican and Democrat, because the Democrat's always gonna win. It's between who's primarying the Democratic incumbent. The incumbent means the guy who's already there, okay? Does that make sense to y'all? Okay. I know I'm slightly all over the board today because we're going from powers to elections. All right, yeah, I want you guys to focus on the enumerated powers and know what the implied powers are in that section of Article 1. We want to let you know that the House of Representatives, as you just said, is known as the People's House. Know that it's around 700,000-ish, 710,000 according to the book I read, but I think it's gone up since then, people per representative. Now the Senate, we've talked about that, and we know that there are how many senators per state?
2.
And so that if there are 50 states, how many are there? How many does that make?
100.
And how long are they in there for? 6 years. This is the upper chamber, okay? And you have to be older. You have to be 30 years of age to be in there. Those are the things you'll need to know. Let me give you the 4 kind of committees that we were just talking about, and then we're gonna move on to some political stuff so that we can talk about what's, current events and stuff like that. That's always funner. We have standing committees. These are permanent issues, like I said. You have joint committees, and these are permanently formed, and they have people from both, houses of Congress. That way you'd have people in these joint committees from the Senate and from Congress. So you have representatives as well as senators in there, okay? If you're in the House of Representatives, you're called a congressman or a congresswoman. If you're in the Senate, you're called a senator, okay? You have select committees, and like I said, these are the temporary ones, and these are created for specific purposes. And then you have conference committees, and these are committee that are formed to iron out the differences in bills. So like you have a bill in the House and you have a bill in the Senate, and they're similar bills. So what they do is they form a committee to get rid of the differences, so that, because they have to vote on the same bill eventually. That way you know which bill is becoming law, okay? Here's some advantages to I can put this up online too if you'd like. These are just, I used to have a PowerPoint that I used, but because of the way we're doing things now, I'm not gonna use the PowerPoint because I don't think it'd work well with the video. Anyway, here's some advantages to committees. Members become specialized in a particular area, as I mentioned. They allow Congress to handle a greater, they allow Congress to handle a greater amount of work. It's a divide and conquer type method. So as I was saying, it keeps each member from having to be a specialist in all of these areas. They can focus on their own area. 3, like I suggested earlier, the legislators, they can sit on committees that are important to them and their constituents. So for example, like I said, those who are focused in areas having to do with farming, they could sit on that committee. And here's the final one. You as a citizen have a better chance of swaying a bill or a committee member than of swaying Congress as a whole. Think of having to sway all of Congress instead of just swaying one person on a committee. Because most legislation that is introduced as bills gets killed in committee. It never actually gets voted on the floor, okay? Most of it is killed in the committee. And how many people are in these committees? A lot less than are in the whole House of Representatives or the Senate. So you get a hold of your committee member, right, somebody on the committee, and you express your dislike for the legislation or your desire for them to advance a particular piece of legislation, and you give your argument, and they'll be like, yeah, it's a good argument. I will take that. You have more of a chance of swaying that one person on the committee, or multiple members on the committee, than you would as the whole body of the legislative branch. And thus you could either kill a bill, help kill a bill, or help preserve it, okay? So that's, those are some of the advantages of them, all right? I talked about select committees being temporary. They're there just to basically solve a problem. And once that problem is gone, so too is the committee. All right, so select committees are temporary, test question. All right, I'm gonna give you a I'm going to talk a little bit about committees. Bills going through committees. We could talk about referrals, where the Speaker of the House or the Majority Leader is known as the Senate Majority Leader, okay? So that's in the Senate. They can refer a bill through committees. And in these committees, they're will be hearings that take place, and they are generally fact-finding missions to discuss the facts of the bill. Now, the fun thing about this, or fun fact about this, is politics can be very boring, right? And so, when you watch the news, what you get is a 1-minute story by the politicians trying to sway your opinion, but behind closed doors, it is not quite as flamboyant, okay? Because the cameras aren't there for them to turn their personalities on, so to speak, okay? So it's a lot more boring. Once a committee, a bill will go into markup, and that's where it goes to, the language gets hammered out. What does this mean? What do you know, how does this work? And then, so what they do is they start to detail that particular piece of legislation. Reports are made, and then finally, if it passes through the Rules Committee, which establishes the rules regarding the establishment, there's a Rules Committee that says, how are we gonna vote on this? Okay? Then it gets, if it passes, gets through that committee, then it can be voted on. Now, we'll talk about, interestingly enough, if you are, the ranking member of the committee, what does that mean? The ranking member of the committee is, you have the ranking member of the minority, okay, the minority ranking member, right? And you have the committee chair, okay? The committee chair is of the party that is in power. So all of the, I know this is tiring, isn't it?
Sorry.
No, I'm not. I know. But it's good stuff. But appropriate response. Politics can be boring, okay? And that's probably the way it should be. Let's say we got some legislation that I introduce, and you are in charge, you're the chair of the committee. Who's the chair of the committee? Well, if the Democrats are the majority in power, then they are the ones who chair the committees, okay? So right now, all the chairs are of what party? Yeah, because the Democrats are the majority. And they have the majority of people on the committees. And then you have the ranking member of the minority party. So each committee has a ranking member of the minority party, and they have the chair, which is of the majority party. They could table any legislation and not even bring it up for discussion, okay? You can literally kill a bill before it ever even gets to be discussed. And that's the power of the committees, especially the power of being in charge of the committees. They say, well, we're not even going to look at this. We're going to look at other stuff, okay? They set, basically, they set what's going to happen for the day, for the week, for the whatever. And I've got this piece of legislation. We should at least look at it. And we'll table that. We'll put that down later. They set the agenda. So it's a very powerful way to kill legislation that you do not like. Does it make sense? Okay. So committees can be very powerful. Committees can also have investigative powers, and this is one of the functions of committees is oversight. Oversight. And in oversight, they could investigate issues. They could call agency heads to testify. They can compel charges to regulations. Now, or changes, not charges, changes to regulations. However, they can investigate, but they cannot charge. So they could say you are guilty of something, but they cannot say put you in jail for it. You're not on real trial. And so, of course, they can modify levels of spending and funding and all that. Let me give you some examples of some oversight committees that took place. While prior to Donald Trump's presidency, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was under investigation for what? Well, all sorts of things. But one of them was the Benghazi issue. What happened in Benghazi? Does anybody know?
Yeah.
Tell me what happened.
I know that there were at least 5 soldiers that got killed because.
Were they soldiers? One was the ambassador.
Really?
Yeah, our ambassador, Chris Stevens, was killed at the Benghazi, they were there,
And there's something about they could have sent help, but they decided against it.
So, yeah, the question was, did somebody tell the security forces that could have gotten there to quote, and here's the quote, to stand down, to not do anything, okay? And there was other things going on, statements saying that this was not a terrorist attack. Who knows what day this ended up being on? 9/11, okay? It was kind of like on the anniversary. And so these guys attack the compound, which was supposed to be an embassy, which was not exactly fortified in a way that should have been, it wasn't really up to standards for that. Apparently, the local security forces that they had hired all took off. They're just like, we're out of here, bye. And so they made a movie out of it. Was it 13 Hours?
Yeah.
Okay, if you've not seen 13 Hours, are you into action-packed movies that watch 13 Hours? It's, the guy who wrote it was one of the guys who was there, Chris, I think his name's Chris Peranto, they call him Tonto. He was a ex, either Green Beret, SEAL, or Army Ranger. He's some kind of special forces guy, and he was there. To say, how accurate it is besides the point. It's just a fun movie to watch, intense, okay, if you're into that. 13 Hours. In fact, I'm gonna go home and watch it. They looked into that. Congress looked into that, and they wanted to know what failures happened. How did this happen? Who's responsible for this, right? And there was, interestingly enough, in investigating that, they found out other things that the Secretary of State, she had her own private server on her own private land, which she wasn't supposed to have. You could have that, but she was putting governmental work stuff on there, which is a no-no. And so there was this big conspiracy thing going on, and they looked into it, and it is still going on. The Senate is still looking into this, okay? Fast and Furious, that was another fun one where the government looked into another problem that happened. America started selling weapons to cartels in order to track where the guns were going, and it turned into a debacle because a couple of American DEA agents, I think it was either DEA or somebody, Border Patrol, got killed with these weapons. And then there had to be oversight, and they questioned Eric Holder, and Eric Holder ended up being held in contempt of Congress. So he was like, got all snooty about it. How dare you, question me? And then all of a sudden, you're in contempt of Congress, which, by the way, doesn't really do anything to you, because remember, they can't exactly throw you in jail. I think there's a $1,200 charge or something fine for it. Yeah, go charge the multimillionaire $1,200. I'd be like, let me get my wallet. Several others. Here's a good one going on still to this day, the Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andrew McCabe one, where they're looking into the Senate Judiciary Committee right now is looking in, or is it the Intelligence Committee? I think it's the Intelligence Committee. They're looking into charges against the FBI all the way up to Joe Biden, and even Barack Obama, that they were trying to rig the election in favor of Hillary Clinton, and then once she won, they were trying to falsely accuse Donald Trump of treasonous actions with Russia so that they could impeach him. Now that's a claim, and they're investigating that, and all sorts of new documents are coming out right now because because Donald Trump has declassified them so that we could all see them. And the latest one is where the head of the CIA, John Brennan, told then President Barack Obama that Hillary Clinton was planning to use some dirt on Donald Trump to initiate a scandal to help her win the election, and that scandal was the Russian one, because they had this thing called the Trump dossier, which was a little booklet of information on Trump about some of the crazy things he did that were, treasonous to our country and sexually explicit, which turned out to all be false. And yet, that was used. Who knows that Donald Trump was impeached in here? All of you good, for camera's sake, right? What was he impeached on for?
Was it treason that?
No, it wasn't treason. We had a conversation with Ukraine, President of Ukraine.
Wasn't he looking into Biden's son?
Yeah.
And
So
then, they.
it was abuse of power.
Bribery, wasn't it bribery?
Yeah, it was kind of quid pro quo.
Okay.
They're trying to prove a quid pro quo. What does quid pro quo mean?
If you give me something.
This for
I'll
that.
give you something.
This for that. If you do this, I'll do that. Okay? And they're suggesting that's corruption, and so they're trying to impeach him. And of course, that went really nowhere. It went to the Senate, and of course, he was basically exonerated. I'm trying to think of the term. Well, anyway, with that being said, Senate, Congress is very important. You have, if you are in the House or if you're in the Senate, you're going to be on committees, and some of those committees are going to be probably a little more exciting than others. But all the committees are important for certain reasons, okay? And so if you're in a committee in Texas, if you're, what committees are Texas, representatives on, and what committees are our senators on? Who are our two senators here in Texas? I know them. Does anybody know who Theodore Cruz is? Ted Cruz? You've heard of him? Have you heard of John Cornyn? John Cornyn's a little less outspoken than Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz ran for president. Okay. So what party do they belong to? They're both Republicans. You can have a Republican and a Democrat, right? But in this case, we have both Republicans in here. And so it'd be fine and be wise for us to know what committees they're on, because we want to know what influence they have over the legislation that is getting passed. Besides just voting on one bill for one thing, what influence do they have, major influence do they have over the legislation that crosses over the desks? Because in the Senate, who's in the majority?
Well,
The Republicans are in the majority in the Senate, and in the House, the Democrats are. Makes it very hard to pass a whole lot of anything. But if you're in the business of confirming judges, then it's good to have the Senate. Because the Senate does what? Confirms federal judges. Who nominates them? The president. So we got a lot of fire hosing out here today. You got a lot of good test questions going at you. I bet if you watch this video, you can mine it for test questions. Okay, let's talk a little bit about political theater and political issues. Like I said, there's an election coming up, and we are not just electing the president. While it is important to elect a president, remember the statement, all politics is local? That means it is more important to us, or more impactful to us, to pay attention to the local races, those races that are closer in the city, in the state and county, and then the House of Representatives, and then to the Senate. So we know that every 2 years, our House members are up for election. So you know that if there's an election going on, there's a House member going up. So Lizzie Fletcher, she's the incumbent in our district. Al Green's the incumbent in your district. He's going nowhere. Is anybody running against him at all? Check it out. See who's running against him. Very hard to unseat that guy. The guy's been there forever. Lizzie Fletcher has been there. This is her first term. And who is running against her? Wesley Hunt. Who knows who Wesley Hunt is?
I'm pretty sure isn't he I don't know too much.
He's a former military guy. He's an Army helicopter pilot. Flew over 50, combat missions. So very, he has a great looking family. He looks very nice and handsome guy. And you're going, yeah, I can see him beating her. And he's got a lot of backing. And he's a Republican. And the district he's in, even though it went Democrat last time, it doesn't have to continue to go Democrat because Fletcher actually, she was the one who turned it Democrat. It could turn back. Did you see who's running against her? Who's running against your, who's your, Flores, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's running against Flores? Who's running against Green? And who's running against, remind me of who do you recall who?
Nope.
Well, we know that. All of our representatives are up for election. You want to ask yourself, why would I want this person still here, or why would I want to replace them? Also, there is an election for our Senate. Which senator out of the two of our Senate seats is up for re-election? His name rhymes with Ornin. Cornyn? Okay, good. Why don't you look that up? Who's running against him, and who is this person? We know that the person's probably, going to be a Democrat because Cornyn's a Republican. But we want to know, why would we want to keep or replace these people? And it's not just the people. See, in the primary, you'll go, okay, I want to replace him because it's him. But once you get to the general election, not the primary election, you want to know who holds the platform that you hold. What is the Democratic platform? What do I mean by platform to begin with, at all?
Your beliefs?
What's that?
Like your beliefs?
Yeah, it's like, what are the issues that and where they stand on the issues, right? And what are the major issues on any platform? Is education an issue? Yes. Healthcare, that's an issue. What about abortion? Is that an issue? Yeah. What about religion? Is that an issue? Yes. What about the military? Is that an issue? Okay. Right now, policing is an issue. What about the Second Amendment? Who knows what your right to keep and bear arms, is that an issue? Should you have a right to defend your life, right? And you say yes?
Yeah.
You don't, okay, good. So you're not gonna say, no, I have an obligation to die if somebody's gonna hurt me. Okay, good. Some would say, hey, I know there's some who would say that. I've read their work. They say, no, you have no right to hurt anybody if they're trying to hurt you. Same-sex marriage. What about the economy? What about taxing the rich? Who hates the rich here? None of you. Good, right? Because we're all rich compared to the rest of the world. Compared to Ethiopia, we are loaded. Okay? But in America, what does it mean to be rich? And should they pay more than they already do? And who shall they pay? Whom shall they pay? And what shall they pay for? Raising taxes, that's really what it is. And who has to pay these taxes and who does not? What about owning businesses? Should we regulate businesses or should we get rid of regulation? Is that an issue on a platform? Have you ever thought about owning a business? You never thought? Always thought about being an employee, not an owner? I know, it's heavy, isn't it? There's a lot of responsibility to be a business owner. And there's a lot of risk involved. If you lose it all. And can the government make it harder on you to own a business? Sure can. Can the government make it easier on you? There's some initiatives, some incentives, right? Business loans. There's a new thing that President Trump did. I wish I could remember what it is. It's not the Fresh Start, that's a different thing. Has to do with building businesses in some of the poor neighborhoods in America where they're trying to revitalize these neighborhoods so that these people who live there can not only have jobs, but some of these people can actually own their own business. And so there's a big incentive for that. So government can actually not only just get rid of regulations, get out of the way, sometimes they can help. But of course that means anytime the government, President Reagan said the two worst things you can hear are, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." But, they could give you grants and stuff like that, money, and, of course, money comes from somewhere, right? So if we're giving money to this person, it's coming from you. So some people like and don't like it. But the economy, we have to deal with the economic situations, and what are the issues that the Democrats hold on the economy? Where do they stand on the economy? What type of economy do they desire? A free market economy, a mixed economy, or a more socialized economy, which the government takes control of some of the higher places. So for example, when we talk about the environment, which is another hot topic on the platforms of the political parties, there's this thing called AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Green New Deal. This idea that the government is going to start forbidding the use of fossil fuels. That means all of the cars that we're driving right now they'll be obsolete, we'll no longer be able to use them. Everything will have to go to some kind of electric. We'll no longer be able to use fossil fuels to generate electricity, therefore it's all wind, solar, or otherwise. Hydro, which, some people are like, that's impossible. But then they say all the buildings in the nation will either have to be built new, like in a way that is environmentally friendly, or they'll have to be retrofitted to become environmentally friendly. So what happens there is the government is now taking over the energy of America, the energy business, and regulating it in such a way saying this, you cannot use this anymore for energy, and you have to use this for energy, right? So there is a level of control that one party wants over a certain sector of the economy. So you ask the question, how much control do you want your government to have over the economy? Because when the government takes control, what does it do? It governs it, right? And it tells you what you cannot do, because that's what laws are for. They tell you what to do and what not to do, okay? They say, and by the way, they wouldn't tell you what to do if you'd naturally do it, right? There'd be no need for a law. If you're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go pay all this money to do all this. No, they're like, yeah, you're not doing it, so we're gonna make a law, and if you don't do it, we're gonna fine you, or we're gonna put you in jail, okay? How's that? So it depends on where you stand on certain issues of the environment. That, look at the platforms. Now, if you look at the platform of the Democratic Party from the DNC website, it's all roses. Everything's great. And if you look at the platform from the Republican, the RNC, what are you gonna find? It's all roses. Okay? If you look at the Democratic platform from the Republican standpoint, it's all doom and gloom. Oh my God, they're coming to get us. If you look at the Republican side from the Democrat platform, from the Democrat side, they're like, oh man, they're gonna kill you. Okay, you see how I will caricaturize my political enemy. I'll let you know what I think of that, okay? if you get it from the horse's mouth, they're like, oh, everything's gonna be utopia, you know, if you just follow us. If you go to their site, all right? Just keep in mind, there is no such thing as utopia. Heaven will not be created on earth, I can promise you that. Foreign affairs, how we treat other countries. How should we treat Russia? How should we treat China? How should we treat Iran? What about Mexico and Canada? How should they be treated? Are these our friends or these our enemies? Can Russia be trusted? Can China be trusted? Should we get rid of dealing with China at all, given that they steal all of our economic, our intellectual property, and then they sell it back to us? Given the fact that they will not buy our products, but they will sell us products, we can give them jobs, but they will not give us. How should we deal with them? How about Iran? Should Iran be dealt with at all in any positive sense, given that they are the largest state sponsor of terror? That if there is terrorism in the world, it is most likely funded by Iran. What about Israel? How should we deal with Israel? President Trump promised that he was going to move the embassy, the U.S. embassy, right, to Jerusalem. Several presidents before him promised the same thing, and they never did it. Then when Donald Trump said what he was going to do and actually did it, all these people threw a major fit, except for the Jews, of course, who are like, yeah, that's you said you're going to do it. Yay! You're recognizing Jerusalem as the rightful capital of Israel. They're like, oh my gosh, you're going to cause a war. He did it. War hasn't happened, okay? You can see how people are, you know, when it comes to the other political parties' decisions. Where do you stand on foreign policy? Do you think we should go to war with other countries? Like if somebody, let's say, I don't know, Iran invades Iraq, okay? As though those two have never been to war with each other, right? You know, they have. Okay. Should we get involved in that? You say no.
As long as they're not bothering us.
It's not bothering us. Well, it depends. We get oil from that part of the country, right? And there are bodies of water that our oil has to pass through. And let's say we're buying oil from Iraq, okay? Let's pretend we are. And all of a sudden our tankers are moving through a particular strait out there, and all of a sudden Iran's attacking them.
That's what we're coming.
Now we got a financial interest, okay? Well, let's go then. So what's an alternative? Well, maybe we should use our own oil, right? Going back to the environment, then somebody says, you can't drill here, right? We're not gonna allow you to drill in Alaska. We're not gonna allow you to do this thing called fracking. What's fracking? Fracking is where they go under the earth, well, they drill into the earth, and then they kind of go a little horizontal, and they start putting, I don't think they have to go horizontal, but they start putting explosives in there, and they start blowing up, you know, the inside of the earth's crust, and it's releasing gas, natural gas or oil, and there are people who are going, you can't do that, man, it's gonna cause a bunch of, you know, earthquakes and hurt us, which has not proven to be the case yet, that's my bias, and they're against fracking. So if you watched the debate last night, they're asking, would you ban fracking? Because that's a big deal. Why is it a big deal? It was because that has made America the leading contributor of natural gas in the world. And where is all that taking place? Texas. I think there's a place called the Permian Basin. I'm really not good at this stuff. But
Odessa.
Odessa, right? Okay. So that's, you can imagine the large quantities of money, right, that are coming into the great state of Texas from this procedure, fracking. And New Mexico is enjoying some of this too. You get rid of that, what do? You can crush an economy. So we don't have money anymore. You want that? Puts a lot of people out of work. Don't have money, you can't go to school. You can't go to school, you can't get a job. Can't get a job, well dang it, how am I gonna feed my kids? Texas runs on oil. This school runs on oil. If the oil industry goes bad, this school goes south. It's not just one industry. it's all the industries that work around. So where you stand on these issues will depend on this is how you should decide who to vote for. Not because they're really cool looking, not because they're like you, whether they be female or male or otherwise, but the issues, okay? Immigration. I have a lot of friends that are not exactly legal, okay? And I have friends that are of a particular race that are legal. And we have to ask the question, how do we deal with an issue of immigration? How should we control the population here? Should we just let everybody come in? Is that a good thing? Or should we enforce the law but change the law? What are the options? What's the one? You gotta say what the problem is, and then you gotta go, what is the options? And where you stand on that, because it can affect your family. There's a lot of people whose families are involved out here, right? Like somebody crosses the border and now their kids have grown up in America. They don't even speak, Canadian anymore or Spanish, because Canadian's a language, right? Or German or whatever. And they the whole group of people called the Dreamers were smuggled across with their parents, and they grew up here, and they're not Americans legally. And you send them to Mexico, it's not back to Mexico. That'd be like shipping me back to Washington where I was born. I'm like, I don't know this place. Just because I was born there doesn't mean, And so they grew up in, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, Colorado, California, wherever, and they speak English better than I do. And then you gotta go to Mexico, or you gotta go to Guadalajara, that's Mexico, or you gotta go to, I don't know, several other places, Colombia, or, and now all of a sudden they're like, well, I don't even speak the language. Is that fair to them? No, it's not fair to them. But the problem was, we have to ask, who caused the problem? Did the government cause the problem? Or are the parents to blame? Or is the country from which they were brought to blame? It's a lot deeper than I'm making it. I mean, I'm just trying to throw things at factors. There's parents, there's countries, there's policies, there's no roadmap to citizenship, right? These kids are stuck in the middle, they don't know what to do, they can't go to one. They're people without a country. They're just like you and I, but I didn't make the choice to be born in America, and they didn't make the choice for their parents to bring them in here. So what do you do with them? Do you just go, well, that's cool? What happens if you say, we'll let you slide this time? Well, then that's an incentive. Bring your kid to America, and guess what? They get free citizenship. So you don't want to incentivize it, but then on the other hand, you also want to be humane too, don't you? Very tough. So wherever you stand on that may determine who you're going to vote for, especially if you have family members or friends who may be deported. Education. Let me ask you a really quick question here. So has anybody been to a charter school here? I haven't. I'm really, apparently charter schools do have much better results than standard public schools, okay, from what I understand. And they are funded by the state, okay? So the state can give you money, and you take that money and go to a charter school. Are all schools considered equal? Yes or no? No. Are some schools better than others? Are some schools really bad? Yeah. Now, I grew up in the public school system, okay? So I didn't know any better. I just took what I got, right? And now imagine you live in a bad neighborhood with a very bad school, okay? And there are school districts where the kids come out and they cannot read. And we're talking high schoolers, okay? They cannot read or do math. They just push them through. And the teachers are just like, I'm collecting a paycheck, I'm doing my 180 days a year, I hate this until I get a normal job in a nice neighborhood, and I say God bless them. I worked as a high school teacher in California, okay? And it's very difficult. It was one of the largest schools in Los Angeles. It's in Burbank. It actually is in Glendale. We're talking a school with like 5,000 students. It was huge. High school. And that wasn't even a bad high school. It was a fine high school. I mean, it worked okay. But do you think President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Trump, do you think they send their kids to private schools? I mean, public schools? No, they don't. They send them to the most elite private schools in America, in New York and in DC. Where do the most elite people send their kids to school here in Houston?
Just like, private schools like Kincaid.
Kincaid, yeah.
I know like St. Agnes, St. Thomas, most of like the private schools.
These private schools, right. So what if the government were to give you a chit, we'll call it, a piece of money, a paper, that says you can take this is money, you can't spend it anywhere but at a school. You can take your kid and put your kid in this school. It's kind of like a tax rebate. You paid your taxes, right? And your taxes go to schools, right? So they give you money back and they say you can take this and put your kid in any school they want to go to or you want your kid to go to. Is that okay? You're like, no. Who's against that? It's called school choice. There are two types of people against it. One, school unions are against it, teacher unions are against it because teachers get their money for butts in the seats. You start taking kids away, you start taking money away from those schools. So that's a big deal. They're gonna fight, and so the teacher unions are gonna fight for what's theirs, money that is. I'm familiar with this fight because I was in it. Not that I you know, I'm a more of a private school advocate, but so you can imagine. But I was in the public school system, grew up in it, and I also worked in it. So I know their interest is involved, and they're a very powerful union throughout the government, throughout the United States. But then there are other people who say you should not give these people money because what types of schools will they send them to?
Ivy League.
Not Ivy
Oh,
League.
no, what you're talking about.
Just we're talking K through 12.
Private schools?
Private schools, but what are most private schools? She named a couple, Kincaid. What is Kincaid? What, St. Thomas? What kind of school is St. Thomas?
Sorry, that's a college.
St. Thomas is also a high school.
Oh, okay, and then also St. John's.
Do you hear a lot of saints involved with this? They're religious, so a lot of people are all like, we're not gonna be paying for your kid to get trained religiously. That's a separation of church and state, right? And most of the thing is, they don't like it because you start sending people to religious schools, what happens to the students? They come out religious. And what happens when religious people vote? They vote to overturn certain laws that are controversial, such as same-sex marriage laws, abortion laws, you can see drugs, pornography, right? And people like their pornography and they like their their abortions, and they like their same-sex marriages. And so you start, making a country more religious, and they don't like the way they're gonna vote at the end of the day. School's a very powerful place to mold your minds for you to vote like I vote, sir. Well, that's true. I mean, that's one of the biggest controversies over education right now, is that it is a highly biased place. If you go to the state schools, just like the news as we were discussing earlier, the academy, the schools are predominantly dominated by the Democratic Party. And that's why socialism has become such a big issue in America. It's because it's being spoken about and preached about in the colleges. Now, you're in a Christian college, so you're gonna get a more conservative view. But if you were at U of H, if you were at, say, Texas Tech, or even Texas A&M, or UT, especially UT, I wouldn't be, but your professor would be preaching the advantages of socialism and why we need to get rid of the the oppressive system we're under right now. And I remember as a Cal State Northridge, I was supposed to be learning how to teach in a class on what's called pedagogy, and the guy was up there just basically railing off on Christians and how Christians have ruined the world. And I'm like, hey, what does this have to do with teaching? But to him, he's like, well, if we get rid of Christianity, well, everything will be better. So you see these debates on the platforms, okay? And school choice is one of them, where you stand on whether or not you would send your kid to one school or the other, okay? Obviously, if you're a teacher, you're gonna vote for your own paycheck. I mean, that makes sense. There's nothing weird about that. Abortion's an issue. Like I said, the legalization of drugs, marijuana is an issue. Who are you gonna vote for based on these issues? Immigrations. So I'm going to put up an assignment, official assignment, for you to go through the issues. And I want you to tell me where you stand on the issues. The key is why. And then who. Who represents that issue best in your particular political fight right now. They're having, in the election, right? So you and I, Lizzie Fletcher, does she represent our views or not, right? Does Dan Green, right? Representative Green, Al Green, does he represent your views on these issues? Why do you believe these issues, whatever issue it may be? Where do you stand on them? Does the representative in your district represent them? And who represents them better, perhaps? Either he or his opponent. And there's no, oh, well, you're wrong on this. I mean, you may be wrong in your reasoning, and I might point that out, but I'm not gonna grade you based on your decisions, if that makes sense. It's more like make sure you learn about why and who. Does that make sense? What, why, and who? I think that does it. I think we're all good.